David had always been fascinated by space. Ever since he was a little boy looking up at the stars from his bedroom window, he dreamed of becoming someone who would help humanity reach the cosmos. Now, at 28 years old, he worked as an aerospace engineer at one of the world's most prestigious space research centers. The International Space Conference in Geneva was the highlight of his year. Scientists, engineers, and researchers from around the globe gathered to share their latest discoveries about space exploration. David had been looking forward to this event for months, especially because he would be presenting his own research on advanced propulsion systems. On the second day of the conference, during the afternoon break, David decided to walk around the exhibition hall. The place was buzzing with excitement as people examined the latest space technology displays. There were models of rockets, satellite equipment, and even a life-size replica of a Mars rover that had everyone's attention. As David approached the Mars rover display, something caught his eye. Among the crowd of scientists and visitors, there was a woman who seemed completely different from everyone else. She wasn't just beautiful in the ordinary sense. There was something about her that made David stop in his tracks and forget what he was doing. Her appearance was striking in ways he couldn't quite put into words. She had long, flowing hair that seemed to catch the light in an unusual way, making it appear almost silver in some angles and dark brown in others. Her skin had a subtle glow to it, as if she spent a lot of time in perfect sunlight. But it was her eyes that truly captured David's attention. They were large and expressive, with a depth that seemed to hold mysteries he couldn't begin to understand. What fascinated David even more was how she moved. While everyone else in the crowded hall seemed rushed and eager, she moved with a grace that reminded him of a dancer. Every step seemed purposeful, every gesture flowing naturally into the next. She wasn't hurrying like the other conference attendees. Instead, she was studying everything around her with intense curiosity. David watched as she examined the Mars rover display with incredible focus. She wasn't just looking at it like a tourist might. She was studying every detail, taking notes in a small notebook with what appeared to be symbols rather than regular letters. Her concentration was so complete that she seemed unaware of the crowd around her. That's when it happened. As she leaned forward to get a better look at one of the rover's instruments, her pen slipped from her fingers and fell to the floor. Without thinking, David quickly stepped forward and picked it up before anyone could step on it. "Here you go," he said, offering the pen back to her with a friendly smile. As their hands touched during the exchange, David felt something he had never experienced before. It was like a small electric current passed between them, but not uncomfortable. Instead, it felt warm and somehow familiar, as if he had been waiting his entire life for this moment. "Thank you so much," she replied, and David was immediately struck by her voice. It had a musical quality to it that seemed to resonate in harmonies. Her accent was unusual too, not quite European, not quite American, but something entirely unique. "I'm David," he said, extending his hand for a proper introduction. "My name is Luna," she replied, accepting his handshake. Again, that's strange, but pleasant electric sensation passed between them. "I'm here as a foreign research exchange student, studying your planet's space exploration efforts." The way she said your planet struck David as odd, but he assumed it was just an unusual way of expressing herself due to her foreign background. Many international students spoke in unique patterns when using English as a second language. "What's your field of study?" David asked, genuinely curious about her research. "I'm particularly interested in how humans approach the challenge of traveling beyond Earth," Luna explained, her eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. "The methods your species has developed are quite fascinating to observe." Again, her choice of words seemed unusual, but David found her perspective refreshing. Most people at these conferences spoke in technical jargon, but Luna had a way of discussing space exploration that made it sound like poetry. "Are you enjoying the conference so far?" David asked, hoping to continue their conversation. "Very much," Luna replied, glancing back at the Mars rover. "Though I must admit, some of your technologies are more advanced than I initially expected." while others seemed surprisingly primitive for being as capable of such complex emotional experiences. David found her observation interesting, though he wasn't entirely sure what she meant by it. Before he could ask for clarification, the announcement came over the loudspeaker that the afternoon sessions were about to resume. "I should probably head back to my presentation," David said reluctantly. He didn't want their conversation to end, but he had professional responsibilities to attend to. "Of course," Luna said with understanding. "Perhaps we could continue our discussion later? I find your perspective on space exploration quite enlightening." "I'd like that very much," David replied, surprised by how much she meant it. "Maybe we could meet for coffee after the sessions end today." "That would be wonderful," Luna agreed, and her smile seemed to light up not just her face, but somehow the entire area around them. As David walked away to attend his presentation, he found himself thinking about Luna instead of focusing on his upcoming speech. There was something about her that he couldn't shake from his mind. It wasn't just her unusual beauty or her unique way of speaking. There was something deeper, something that made him feel as though meeting her wasn't just a coincidence, but something that was meant to happen. For the rest of the afternoon, David struggled to concentrate on the technical presentations and scientific discussions. His thoughts kept drifting back to Luna, to the way her eyes seemed to hold depths he couldn't fathom, and to the strange but wonderful sensation he felt when they touched. He had never believed in concepts like destiny or fate, but meeting Luna made him question everything he thought he knew about chance encounters and meaningful connections. Little did David know that this meeting would change not only his understanding of the universe, but his entire perception of what it meant to be human in a cosmos far larger and more mysterious than he had ever imagined. Over the next 3 days of the conference, David found himself spending more and more time with Luna. What started as a simple coffee meeting had turned into something much deeper and more meaningful than he had ever expected. Their first evening together was magical. They sat in a small cafe near the conference center, talking until the place was ready to close. Luna asked questions that no one had ever asked him before. While most people wanted to know about the technical aspects of his work, Luna was curious about why humans felt the need to explore space in the first place. "What drives your species to look beyond your own world?" she asked, stirring her coffee but never actually drinking it. "Is it curiosity, or is it something deeper?" David thought for a moment before answering. "I think it's both," he said. "We're naturally curious creatures, but there's also something inside us that feels like we belong to something bigger than just Earth, like we're meant to be part of the larger universe." Luna's eyes lit up with genuine interest. "That's fascinating," she said. "So you feel a connection to the cosmos, even though you've never left your planet?" "Exactly," David replied, though he found her way of phrasing things slightly unusual. "Don't you feel the same way when you look up at the stars?" "Yes," Luna said softly, gazing out the window at the night sky, "though perhaps in ways you might not expect." The second day, they spent their lunch break walking around Lake Geneva. The conference sessions were interesting, but David found himself much more excited about his conversations with Luna. She had a way of looking at things that challenged everything he thought he knew about science and space exploration. "Your Mars missions are impressive," Luna said as they watched boats drift across the peaceful water. "But have you considered that the journey itself might be more important than the destination?" "What do you mean?" David asked. "Well," Luna explained, "perhaps the real value isn't in reaching Mars, but in how the process of trying to get there changes humanity itself. The technologies you develop, the cooperation required between different countries, the way it makes people think about Earth differently." David had never considered this perspective before. Most scientists focused on the goals they wanted to achieve, but Luna was suggesting that the transformation happening along the way might be equally valuable. "You have such a unique way of seeing things," David told her. "Where did you study?" Before coming here, Luna hesitated for just a moment before answering. "My education took place in a very isolated research facility," she said carefully. "We focused heavily on theoretical physics and the study of consciousness across different forms of life." That sounds incredible, David said. Is it somewhere I might have heard of? Probably not, Luna replied with a mysterious smile. It's quite far from here, and we don't typically accept outside visitors. As they continued walking, David noticed other unusual things about Luna. She seemed to know things about astrophysics that were beyond even his advanced education. When they discussed theoretical concepts about space travel, she described methods and possibilities that sounded like pure science fiction. Yet she explained them with the precision of someone who had studied them extensively. Imagine if you could manipulate the fabric of space itself, Luna said during one of their conversations. Instead of traveling through space, you could fold it, bringing distant locations closer together. The journey that might take thousands of years could happen in moments. That's theoretically possible according to Einstein's theories, David said. But the energy requirements would be astronomical. We're talking about the power of entire stars. What if I told you that the energy is already there? Luna asked with a knowing look. What if the key isn't generating more power, but learning how to work with the natural forces that already exist throughout the universe? David stared at her in amazement. You talk about these concepts like you've actually seen them in practice. Luna looked away, focusing on the mountains in the distance. Sometimes theoretical knowledge can feel very real when you've spent enough time thinking about it. On the third evening, they found themselves back by the lake, sitting on a bench under the stars. David had brought a small telescope, hoping to share his love of astronomy with Luna. But when he began pointing out different constellations, he discovered that Luna already knew far more about them than he did. That's the Andromeda Galaxy, David said, adjusting the telescope's focus. It's about 2.5 million light-years away from us. Beautiful, Luna whispered. But she wasn't looking through the telescope. Instead, she was gazing up at the sky with her own eyes, as if she could see things that weren't visible to David. You know, she said quietly. Distance is such a relative concept. 2.5 million light-years sounds impossibly far to humans, but in the context of the entire universe, Andromeda is practically a neighbor. Have you always been interested in astronomy? David asked. In a way, Luna replied. Though I suppose my perspective on it is quite different from yours. You see the stars as distant destinations to dream about reaching someday. I see them as, she paused, seeming to choose her words very carefully. As what? David prompted. As reminders of home, she finished softly. David felt a strange chill when she said this. Though he wasn't sure why, there was something in Luna's voice, a longing and sadness that suggested her words meant more than they appeared to on the surface. Do you miss home? He asked gently. More than you could possibly understand, Luna replied. And for a moment, David could swear he saw tears forming in her eyes that seemed to shimmer with their own light dot as the evening continued. David found himself falling deeper under Luna's spell. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, not just because of her beauty or her intelligence, but because of the way she made him feel. When he was with her, the whole world seemed more vivid, more alive with possibilities he had never considered before. But along with his growing feelings, David also began to notice things that didn't quite add up. Luna never seemed to eat any of the food they ordered when they went to restaurants. She would order something, move it around on her plate, but David never actually saw her take a bite. Instead, she seemed most energetic and vibrant when they spent time outdoors in the sunlight. There were other small things too. Sometimes Luna would answer his questions before he finished asking them, as if she could predict what he was going to say. Other times, she would make references to scientific concepts that seemed decades ahead of current human understanding. Most puzzling of all were the moments when Luna would look at him with an expression of deep sadness, as if she were carrying the weight of secrets she couldn't share. During these moments, David sensed that Luna was holding back something important, something that might change everything between them. Despite these mysteries, or perhaps because of them, David found himself more drawn to Luna than he had ever been to anyone in his life. There was something about her presence that felt both completely foreign and perfectly familiar at the same time, as if he had been waiting his entire life to meet her without even knowing it. By the fourth day of the conference, David's feelings for Luna had grown stronger than anything he had ever experienced. He found himself thinking about her constantly, even during important presentations and meetings. But along with these powerful emotions came a growing sense that something wasn't quite right about the entire situation. The morning started normally enough. David met Luna for breakfast at their usual spot in the hotel restaurant. As always, she ordered food but barely touched it, instead seeming to draw energy from sitting near the large windows where sunlight streamed in. David had stopped commenting on her unusual eating habits, but he couldn't stop noticing them. "You seem tired today," Luna observed, studying his face with those incredibly perceptive eyes of hers. "I didn't sleep well," David admitted. "I keep thinking about our conversations, trying to understand some of the things you've told me." "What kinds of things?" Luna asked, though something in her expression suggested she already knew what was troubling him. "Well, yesterday you described propulsion systems that don't exist yet, at least not that I know of," David said carefully. "And sometimes when we talk about space exploration, you speak about it like you've personally observed these things rather than just studied them in books." Luna was quiet for a long moment, staring down at her untouched breakfast. "Perhaps I have a very active imagination," she said finally, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. "Or perhaps you're working on classified projects that are more advanced than anything being discussed at this conference," David suggested, trying to find a logical explanation for what he'd been observing. "Something like that," Luna agreed, though she still wouldn't meet his eyes. After breakfast, they attended a presentation about the search for life on other planets. David watched Luna's reactions carefully throughout the entire lecture, while other audience members took notes or asked questions about the technical aspects. Luna seemed emotionally affected by the discussion in ways that puzzled him. When the presenter talked about the possibility of intelligent life existing elsewhere in the universe, Luna's hands clenched tightly in her lap. When someone from the audience asked whether aliens might already be visiting Earth, Luna actually gasped softly, as if the question had physically startled her. "Are you okay?" David whispered to her. "Fine," Luna whispered back, but she was clearly not fine. Her face had gone pale, and she looked like she might be fighting back tears. After the presentation, they walked outside into the afternoon sunshine. Almost immediately, Luna seemed to feel better, her color returning and her usual graceful composure settling back over her like a comfortable cloak. "That presentation seemed to affect you strongly," David said as they found a quiet bench in the conference center's garden. "The topic of life on other worlds is very important to me," Luna replied. "More important than you might realize." "Why is that?" Luna turned to face him fully, and David was struck once again by how her eyes seemed to hold depths that went on forever. "David, what would you do if you discovered that everything you thought you knew about the universe was completely wrong?" "I'm a scientist," David said with a small smile. "Having my assumptions challenged is part of my job. I'd be excited to learn something new, even if that new knowledge meant that your entire way of life would have to change," Luna pressed. "Even if it meant leaving behind everything familiar and venturing into territory." That seemed impossible. David considered her question seriously. There was something in the way she asked it that made him feel like she wasn't speaking hypothetically. "I think," he said slowly, "that the most important discoveries in life require us to step outside our comfort zones. If I learned something that challenged everything I believed, I'd want to explore it, even if it scared me." Luna smiled at this, but it was a sad smile. "You're braver than most people, David. Most humans prefer the safety of what they already know." Again, her choice of words struck him as odd. The way she said "most humans" made it sound like she was speaking as an outsider looking in, rather than as someone who was part of the same species. That evening, they had dinner at a small restaurant overlooking the lake. David had been looking forward to this time alone with Luna, but he couldn't shake the feeling that she was holding back something enormous from him. "Luna," he said as they sat across from each other at a candlelit table, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course," she replied, though he noticed her shoulders tense slightly. Sometimes when we talk, I get the feeling that you're not really from around here. And I don't just mean that you're from another country. I mean something more than that. Luna's fork froze halfway to her mouth, though as usual, she wasn't actually planning to eat the food on it. What makes you say that? She asked carefully. Lots of little things, David said. The way you talk about human behavior like you're studying it from the outside. Your knowledge of advanced physics concepts that shouldn't be possible yet. The fact that you never seem to eat anything, but you get energized by sunlight. The way you look at the stars like you're homesick for them. As David spoke, he watched Luna's face grow increasingly pale. She set down her fork and folded her hands in her lap, looking like someone who had just realized they'd been caught in a lie they never meant to tell. David, she said quietly, there are things about me that would be very difficult for you to understand or accept. Try me, David said gently. I care about you, Luna, more than I've ever cared about anyone. Whatever it is you're hiding, I want to understand. Luna looked out at the lake, where the setting sun was casting golden reflections across the water. For a long time, she said nothing, and David wondered if he had pushed too hard, if he had ruined whatever was growing between them. My family has very strict expectations about how I should conduct myself, Luna finally said. There are protocols I'm supposed to follow. Rules about the kind of relationships I'm allowed to form and with whom. Are you married? David asked, his heart sinking. No, nothing like that, Luna said quickly. It's more complicated than that. My family, my community, they have plans for my life that don't include forming emotional attachments to people outside our group. What kind of community has rules like that? David asked. The kind that lives very differently from the way you live, Luna said cryptically. The kind that has responsibilities and obligations that extend far beyond personal desires. David reached across the table and took her hands in his. Again, he felt that strange electric sensation. But this time it was stronger, more intense. Luna, I don't care about your family's expectations or your community's rules, he said earnestly. What I care about is how I feel when I'm with you and how you feel when you're with me. Isn't that what matters? Luna looked down at their joined hands, and David could swear he saw that strange shimmer in her eyes again, like tears that held their own light. You don't understand, she whispered. The consequences of defying my family's expectations wouldn't just affect me. They would change everything about who I am and where I belong. Sometimes the most important choices we make require sacrifice, David said softly. Luna looked up at him then, and in her eyes he saw a depth of longing and conflict that took his breath away. In that moment, David realized that whatever secret Luna was carrying, it was something that could fundamentally change both of their lives. David, she said, her voice barely audible. What if I told you that everything you think you know about me is wrong? What if the truth about who I really am is something that would challenge everything you believe about what's possible in this universe? Before David could answer, Luna pulled her hands away and stood up abruptly. I need some air, she said, and walked quickly toward the restaurant's exit, leaving David sitting alone at the table, more confused and concerned than ever before. David sat alone at the restaurant table for several minutes, staring at the empty chair where Luna had been sitting just moments before. Her abrupt departure had left him with more questions than ever, and a growing certainty that tomorrow would be their last day together. The conference was ending, and unless he did something tonight, Luna would disappear from his life as mysteriously as she had entered it. He paid the bill quickly and went outside to look for her. The evening air was cool and crisp, with a clear sky full of stars that seemed brighter than usual. David found Luna standing at the edge of the lake, her silhouette outlined against the moonlight reflecting on the water. I'm sorry I ran off like that, Luna said without turning around as David approached. Somehow, she had known he was coming even though he had tried to walk quietly. You don't need to apologize, David said gently, coming to stand beside her. But I do need to understand what's happening here. Between us, I mean. Luna turned to face him, and in the moonlight, her features seemed even more ethereal than usual. There was something about the way the light played across her skin That made her appear almost luminous, as if she were lit from within. "David, this is our last night together," she said softly. "Tomorrow the conference ends, and I have to return to my research facility." "Where is this facility?" David asked. "Maybe I could visit you, or we could stay in touch somehow." Luna shook her head sadly. "It's not possible. The place where I come from, the work that I do, it doesn't allow for outside contact. Once I leave here, it will be as if this week never happened." "That's ridiculous," David said, frustrated. "This is the 21st century. There's no place on Earth that's completely cut off from communication." "You'd be surprised," Luna replied with a mysterious smile that didn't reach her eyes. They began walking slowly along the shoreline, neither of them ready to say goodbye to what had been the most meaningful week of David's life. The path was quiet, with only the gentle sound of water lapping against the shore and the distant noise of the city. Behind them, "Luna, I need you to know something," David said, stopping and turning to face her. "This week with you has changed everything for me. I've never felt this way about anyone before." "David, please don't," Luna said. But there was no real conviction in her voice. "No, I need to say this," David continued. "I know there are things about yourself that you can't or won't tell me. I know your life is complicated in ways I don't understand, but none of that changes how I feel." Luna looked up at the stars, and David could see the internal struggle playing out across her face. When she spoke, her voice was filled with longing. "You have no idea how much I wish things could be different," she said. "You have no idea how much this week has meant to me too." "Then why does it have to end?" David asked. "Whatever obstacles we're facing, we can work through them together." "Some obstacles can't be overcome, David," Luna said sadly. "Some differences between people are too great to bridge." "I don't believe that," David said firmly. "I believe that when two people care about each other the way we do, they can find a way to make it work." They had reached a secluded spot where the path curved away from the main walkway. There was a small bench overlooking the water, surrounded by trees that created a sense of privacy. They sat down together, and David could feel the warmth radiating from Luna's presence beside him. "Tell me about your world," David said quietly. "Tell me about this research facility where you come from." "It's very different from here," Luna said, choosing her words carefully. "The people there, we don't experience emotions the way you do. We don't form attachments or personal relationships. Everything is focused on learning, on gathering information, on understanding how different forms of life function." "That sounds lonely," David observed. "I thought it was normal," Luna replied, "until I came here, until I met you and began to understand what I was missing." David felt his heart racing as he realized this might be his only chance to be completely honest with Luna about his feelings. Tomorrow she would be gone, possibly forever, and he couldn't live with himself if he didn't at least try to show her how much she meant to him. "Luna," he said, turning to face her fully on the bench, "I know this might sound crazy, and I know you have obligations to your family and your work, but I have to ask you something." "What is it?" she whispered, and David could see in her eyes that she already knew what was coming. "I'm falling in love with you," David said, his voice steady despite the emotion behind the words. "I know we've only known each other for a few days, but what I feel for you is stronger than anything I've ever experienced. You make me see the world differently. You make me believe in possibilities I never imagined before." Luna's eyes filled with those strange, shimmering tears again, and she reached out to touch his face gently. "David," she said, "you don't know what you're asking. You don't understand what loving me would mean. Then help me understand." David said, covering her hand with his own. "Whatever it is, we can face it together." For a long moment, they sat in silence, looking into each other's eyes. David could see the war being fought in Luna's heart, could see her struggling between what she felt and what she believed was right or possible. "There's something I need to tell you," Luna said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something about who I really am and why I'm really here." "You can tell me anything," David assured her. Luna took a deep breath, as if she were preparing to dive into deep water from which she might never surface. David. What if I told you that I'm not like you? What if I told you that I'm not even from the same world as you? I'd say that I already suspected something like that, David replied gently. And I'd say that it doesn't matter to me where you come from. What matters is how I feel when I'm with you. Luna stared at him for a long moment, as if she were seeing him clearly for the first time. You really mean that, don't you? She said wonderingly. I do. David confirmed. Luna, I don't care if you're from another country, another culture, or even another planet. I care about the person you are when you're with me. I care about the way you make me laugh, the way you challenge my thinking, the way you make me want to be a better person. Luna stood up abruptly and walked to the edge of the water, hugging herself as if she were cold. David followed her, sensing that they were approaching a moment that would change everything between them. David, Luna said, still looking out over the water, if I told you the complete truth about myself, about why I'm here and what I am, it would change everything, not just between us, but your entire understanding of reality. Try me, David said, moving to stand behind her. Luna turned around slowly, and in the moonlight, David could swear that her eyes were glowing with their own inner light. What if I told you that I've been studying you, she said. What if I told you that everything between us started as an assignment, a mission to understand human emotion and behavior? David felt a chill run down his spine, but he didn't step away. Is that what this is? He asked quietly. An assignment. It started that way, Luna admitted, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. But somewhere along the way, it became something I never expected. Somewhere along the way, I began to feel things I was never supposed to be capable of feeling. David reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. As he did, he noticed that the tears seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly light. Luna, he said softly, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. She nodded, unable to speak. David took her hands in his, looking directly into her luminous eyes. If I kissed you right now, he said, his voice filled with all the love and longing he felt, how would you react? Luna stared at David for what felt like an eternity, his question hanging in the air between them like a bridge that once crossed could never be uncrossed. The moonlight reflected off the lake behind them, creating dancing patterns of light that seemed to mirror the conflict playing out in her luminous eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice was so quiet that David had to lean closer to hear her words. David, if you kissed me right now, she began, her hands trembling slightly in his. My bioneural systems would record every single detail of that moment, every molecule of air between us, every beat of your heart, every electromagnetic pulse that passes between our minds when we connect. David felt his breath catch in his throat. The way Luna was speaking, the clinical precision of her words mixed with deep emotion, confirmed what part of him had been suspecting all along. What do you mean by bioneural systems? He asked gently, though he sensed he already knew the answer. Would change everything. Luna closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering courage for what she was about to reveal. When she opened them again, they seemed to glow brighter in the darkness. I mean that my body, my mind, they don't work the same way yours do, she said. I'm not human, David. I'm what your people would call an alien, though we prefer to think of ourselves simply as beings from another world. Despite having suspected something like this, hearing Luna actually say the words out loud hit David like a physical force. He staggered backward slightly, his mind racing to process this information. You're serious, he said, and it wasn't a question. Completely serious, Luna confirmed. I'm part of an advanced research team that was sent here to study human consciousness and emotion. We've been observing your species for months, trying to understand how you form connections, how you experience love and loss, how you make decisions based on feelings rather than pure logic. David sat down heavily on the bench, his legs suddenly feeling weak. Luna remained standing, watching his face carefully for his reaction. So everything between us, David said slowly, it was all part of your research. It started that way, Luna admitted, and David could hear the pain in her voice. I was assigned to make contact with humans at this conference, to observe your behavior up close. to understand how your species forms emotional bonds. But, David prompted. Sensing there was more to the story, Luna moved closer to him, her expression filled with something that looked very much like human anguish. But I never expected to feel anything myself, she said. My people, we don't experience emotions the way you do. We understand them intellectually, we can observe them, but we don't feel them in our hearts and souls the way humans do. And now, David asked, looking up at her, now I understand why your species writes poetry about love, why you create art about heartbreak, why you make decisions that seem completely illogical, but feel absolutely right, Luna said, tears streaming down her face, because for the first time in my existence, I'm experiencing these emotions myself. David stood up and reached out to touch her face, just as he had done so many times over the past week. This time, however, he was acutely aware of the slight electric sensation that passed between them when their skin made contact. Is that real? He asked. That feeling when we touch? It's the electromagnetic field generated by my nervous system interacting with yours, Luna explained. My people use bioelectric energy differently than humans do. When I'm close to you, when we touch, our energy fields resonate together. It feels like magic, David said softly. To me, it feels like coming alive for the first time, Luna replied. David, you have to understand what you've done to me. Before I met you, I existed, but I didn't really live. I observed emotions, but I didn't feel them. I studied love, but I didn't understand it, and now you do. David asked. Now I know that love isn't just a chemical reaction in the brain, or a survival mechanism for pair bonding, Luna said. It's something that can transcend species, transcend worlds, transcend everything I thought I knew about the universe. David pulled her closer, and this time he could feel the energy between them more strongly than ever. It was warm and comforting and electric all at the same time. Luna, you still haven't answered my question, he said gently. If I kissed you right now, how would you react? Luna looked into his eyes, and David could see the war between duty and desire playing out in her expression. If you kissed me, she said, it would break the last protocol keeping me bound to my mission, because despite everything my people taught me about remaining objective and emotionally detached, I've fallen completely and hopelessly in love with you. David felt his heart soar at her words, even as his mind struggled to fully accept the reality of what she was telling him. What would happen if you broke that protocol? He asked. I would have to choose, Luna said, between returning to my people and reporting my findings, while pretending that none of this ever happened, or staying here with you and becoming something I was never designed to be. What would you become? Someone who chooses love over duty, Luna said simply. Someone who decides that connecting with another soul is more important than following the rules of her species. David cupped her face in his hands, marveling at how human she looked despite everything she had just told him. And what do you want to choose? He asked. I want to choose you, Luna whispered. I want to choose this feeling, this connection, this incredible experience of being truly alive. But David, you need to understand what that would mean. Tell me, David said. It would mean that I could never go home again, Luna said. It would mean adapting to life on Earth permanently, learning to be more human than I ever thought possible. It would mean building a life together that bridges to completely different worlds. David considered this, trying to imagine what their future together would look like. Luna from another planet, himself a human scientist, trying to build a relationship that had never existed before in the history of either of their species. It would be complicated, he said finally, incredibly complicated. Luna agreed. It would be unprecedented, David continued. Completely unprecedented, Luna confirmed. It would be the greatest adventure either of us could ever imagine, David concluded. And Luna smiled through her tears. David, she said, are you saying what I think you're saying? Instead of answering with words, David leaned forward and gently pressed his lips to hers. The moment their lips met, David felt as if every star in the universe had suddenly aligned. The electric sensation he had felt when they touched was magnified 100 times, creating a warmth that seemed to flow through his entire being. But more than the physical sensation was the emotional connection. In that kiss, David felt Luna's centuries of loneliness, her wonder at experiencing human emotion for the first time, her fear of the unknown future, and her overwhelming love for him. When they finally separated, Luna was glowing more brightly than ever, as if the kiss had somehow increased the energy radiating from her entire being. "So," David said, slightly breathless, "how did you react?" Luna laughed, a sound like music that seemed to harmonize with itself. "I reacted," she said, "by deciding that some connections are powerful enough to rewrite the very nature of two souls from different corners of the universe. I reacted by choosing love over everything else I thought mattered." David pulled her close again, and as they stood there under the stars, he realized that their story wasn't ending with this revelation. Instead, it was just beginning. They had a lifetime ahead of them to figure out how to blend their two worlds, how to build something beautiful and lasting from the most unlikely of connections. Looking up at the night sky, David no longer saw distant points of light. Instead, he saw possibilities, adventures, and the vast network of connections that linked all living beings across the cosmos. And at the center of it all was Luna, his impossible love, his bridge to the stars.